All right, welcome to section 1, lesson 2 on form groups. So in the previous lesson, we looked at the mechanics of a form control. In this section, we'll look at some details of a form group, which is another implementation of the abstract form abstract class. So let's go to our first exercise, filtering a list. So for this exercise, we'll have a mocked out task list in our component TypeScript code. We can see, here's our task list down here. And the HTML skeleton up here for our, so we'll have the HTML skeleton of a form that we'll use to filter our tasks. We'll create a form group in our component TypeScript code and bind that form group to the template. And make sure to add a binding to the pre-element at the bottom so we can track the value of the form group as the user enters input. Then we'll subscribe to the value changes of the form group to create a filtered list of tasks by combining the value of the form group with the mocked out tasks property of the component class. Okay. So let's take a look at some of the stuff we have available to us in our component TypeScript file here. So before we even get down to the component being declared down here, we see we have just some helper data up top. So we have an employee type that we can see can be set to Zach or Jeff or Victor. We also have a task interface here. So this is defining the shape of an object for a task, for an interface called task, which we see has a name and then is assigned to, and that assigned to can either point to one of our employees or null. And then we also have the form value interface, which will show us, this is the shape of the form group that we'll be creating. So we have show only unassigned tickets, which is a Boolean, and a name filter, which is a string. And we can see inside of our template over here, that kind of matches to these two controls we have in our form group. So this will be the name filter, whatever we type in here, and this will be the Boolean on the checkbox here that will say whether we should show only unassigned tickets. And then we see here too, there's a couple filters here. So filter for unassigned tickets. This is just a function that will take in a task and some form value. And we can see here we only care, this is destructuring that form value. And from this, we can see the only piece of it we care about for this function is the show only unassigned tickets. So, and this function will return a Boolean. So if we are supposed to only show unassigned tickets, we'll return for a specific task if that has someone that the task is assigned to. Otherwise, it will always return true. So if the checkbox is turned off, we will always pass this filter for any given task. However, if the toggle is turned on, so we show only unassigned tickets, in that case, we will only show a task who does not have an assigned to property. So we'll only show a task that is unassigned. That's pretty much all we're saying here by this function. And similarly here, this is for filter by task name. So given some task and a form value, and to structure that form value to show all we care about is the name filter, we're going to return a Boolean. So if there is a name filter, so if we have any value inside of our task name here, then we will only show the task if it includes that name filter. So if it includes the string that we provide to it. Otherwise, if there's nothing in our task name control, we're always going to show true. So a task will always pass the filter if there's nothing entered in there. Okay, So given that we have sort of these tools to work with, let's go ahead and jump in. So we see here we have our tasks array. We already have filtered tasks right here. So this is going to be another task array, and let's set up a subscription to kind of manage that. So let's create, as we had before, and previous lessons are private destroying, which is a new subject, an RxJS subject of void. And we are going to fire that inside of our ng on destroy. This dot destroying dot next. Great. And let's create our form group. So we are going to create, let's just call it form equals new form group. And we're going to pass an object here. So to match our interface up here, let's just copy these real quick, paste it in, and we are going to say this is a new form control. And so this is our Boolean value. So we're going to start with false, because that seems to make the most sense to me. And for name filter, we're going to create a new form control with an empty string. Right. So now we've created a form group object for us to work with. Let's go into our template now and bind that. So since we're working with a form group, it can be a little more involved. What we're going to do here is we're going to use the form group directive on our form element at the top and bind that to the form. But now for each individual input, we are going to add a form control name. And that name should match the name we gave to the form control inside of this object we passed to the form group constructor. So we're essentially naming our controls using a form group. So we're going to say here, this is the name filter, so we're going to just give it the name filter. Great. And then for our checkbox, we're going to give it a form control name. And the name for this one was show only unassigned tickets. Save on that, format it. And finally, let's do this right here. So inside of our form value. All right, let's take a look at how this looks. And let's make sure we pipe this to JSON so we can get some sensible output from it. Okay. So based on the values we initialized our form with, we can see those reflected here inside the form value. So there's a false given to show only unassigned tickets, which is great. And name filter is an empty string, which is what we expected here. And if we were to type here, we can see that updates down here. If we were to toggle this on or off, we can see that toggling on or off. So that's great. Everything is wired up and bound to the template the way we want it to be and the way we're expecting it to be. So let's take that now and let's listen to this form group and let's do stuff to our filtered tasks to have them show up underneath here. So in between this form control at the top and our kind of stubbed out, this is almost like debug information at the bottom. Let's put in between here this list, and we can see that it's already kind of, the template's already provided to us. For each one of our filtered tasks, we're going to display the task name and who's it's assigned to, which is either going to have the name of the person it's assigned to or unassigned. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do that inside of our ng on init lifecycle hook. So we're going to take this dot form of value changes. So that'll give us a observable of the every value change we detect inside of our form group. We're going to first take until this dot destroying, and that will be to prevent our subscription from leaking. So we'll only listen to this these value changes while the component has not yet been destroyed. And let's put a start with here so that we can get an initial value from it. So we're going to import the start with operator, and we're going to start with this form.value. So the form this will make it so as soon as we create this component, this will already be emitting as soon as it's created, and as soon as it's destroyed, it will stop emitting. And what we're going to want to do to this, we're going to take this and tap it. So given some form, let's do it this way, some form value, which implements the form value interface. So now we know the shape of our data is a form value object, and that's because, as we can see up here, this interface, as we can see, matches the form value we see down here, which was, by design, that's the way we designed our form group, was to match this interface. And that gives us the benefit of now having some nice type safety on dealing with that data here. So what are we going to do here? We're going to say this dot filtered tasks is equal to this dot tasks. And then we're simply going to apply the filters that we saw above. So we're going to filter for unassigned tickets, and as well as filter for task name. Right, so we're going to filter for unassigned tickets, dot filter, filter for task name. Well, let's save that. And it looks like that's not quite taking. What doesn't it like about this? Oh, okay. Right. So rather than, it's the way these functions were set up, I was mistaken on that. So rather than, we still want to have this dot form, this dot filtered tasks is equal to, we're going to take the form value. Actually, let's do this. So we've taken the let's take a step back, because I'm blanking on what we want to be doing here. So looking at these filters, we have some task, we have the form value. So we have our form value at this point coming out of our observable stream. So we simply want to take our tasks and filter each one that way, right? So we want to say, well, let's go back to what we had before. This dot filters tasks equals this dot tasks dot filter. I think that's what we want to do. So there's some task that we have. We want to filter for unassigned tasks. Yes, and here we pass in the task as the first argument, and then our form value as the second argument. We can see by doing this, we've only implemented half of it. So if we click on this, we can see we are correctly only showing unassigned tasks. If we unclick it, all of the tasks appear now. This isn't wired up yet, so let's wire that up as well. So we'll add the filter, task, filter for filter by task name. There we go. There we have task and our form value. Perfect. All right, and since the form value interface is what was used for both of these, even though we only cared about one of the values each time, it just leads for cleaner code here. So we can see for each one of our, for our tasks, we just filter it twice. One first based off the unassigned tickets, and then based on task name. And now we can see if we have forms course, you can see we only see the one that matches. If we click this, we don't see any, which makes sense. But if we delete this and say make all that, and now we can see it's all wired up properly. Great. So there's our first exercise. So let's collapse that. And so note that when form groups, when constructed, take as an argument an object of name abstract forms. As such, we can create a form group that contains both form controls and form groups. So let's see that action in the next exercise. So for this exercise, we just happened to have a form group that created that contained itself form controls, but we could also nest form groups inside of form groups inside of form groups, and so on and so forth. So let's see that in our next example here. So let's look at the hero form component. If you're following along, make sure you're doing the one from section 1, because we do revisit the hero form later on. So there's other components that are similarly named. So for this exercise, look at the provided HTML as well as the hero interface from the TypeScript file. Based on this information, create a form group and bind it to the HTML template provided. Below the form, add binding to this form group's value inside of the pre-element so we can verify the form's value matches the provided hero interface. Okay, so here we have our interface for hero with the name and stats. We can see that maps to the template that's been provided here. So let's go ahead and create our new form for this hero. Scroll up a little so we can still see it. So we're going to create a property on our component called form. It's going to be a new form group. We're going to pass it, well, let's do that. So we're going to pass it, first we need a name for a hero name, and this is just going to be a form control. Same as our last example. We're just going to initialize that with an empty string for now. But then, so to match this object we see in the interface, let's do this one. The next property of a form group we'll call stats. This will be actually a new form group. So here we see a form group nested inside of a form group itself. Now for each one of the properties of hero, stats, we'll create a new form control. We'll just set those all to 0 to start. So attack is a new form control, and we'll put a 0 there. Let's just do that for defense and speed and health. Great. So we've created now our form group that matches up to the interface we've created, and it will match up to the view that we see here. Let's bind up the value real quick. So we can see here our hero is our form.value, and let's pipe that to JSON. Hit save on that. And we can see things are wired up based on how we initialized our form group. So we're correctly implementing the interface. It has a name, which is string. Then it has a stats object, which includes an attack number, a defense number, a speed number, and a health number. But none of this is wired up yet. So let's go to our template and let's wire it up. So same with form. we say, this is same as our last example, form group is equal to form. Now when we go to name, we say form control name is equal to name. So hit save on that and just make sure that's wired up properly. So we'll call this Zach. It looks like it's not. Let's see what's going on with that. Oh, I did it on the absolutely wrong element. That'll do it. So let's do that. And here we have a full control name. Great. So now when we type in Zach, we should see, yeah, the name is changing. And it gets, things get a little more interesting here. So as we can see, we have a new form inside of our form. Let's just call this, so we'll use the form group name directive here. And we actually don't need the brackets around it because all we need to pass it is the name of the group, which was stats, as we can see here. So this is just a way of nesting that form group within the parent form group. And now we can see for each one of these, let's make sure we do it on the right one actually. Form control name is equal to attack. And let's copy that over for defense. And speed, and finally health. Great. So now we should see inside of our hero form and type in Zach here. It's updated. We can go entering different values inside of each stat. Everything is wired up. And since we set it up to implement the hero form, or the hero interface here, we can be confident that the value of this form will always implement this interface. It's interesting to note too that form groups are not, and every abstract control is not out of the box generic. And there are ways of forcing some sort of generic structure onto an abstract control, but in general it's pretty hairy because pretty much what you have to do is take every property that has some sort of any type on it and coerce it to the type you want, and it just turns into a lot of code that doesn't really give you too much benefit, since as a developer you kind of know what the value of this form is. So we'll see in future lessons, we'll actually use factory functions to sort of set up these form groups. And we'll pass in, just to kind of make this a little cleaner, we'll have, so for the hero form group, for example, we'll kind of nest this away, this constructor code right here, the initiating a new form group. We'll stash it inside of a factory function that will just take an interface of hero. And we'll take all the values here and stick them into each one of their initial values here. So we don't have to kind of distribute the initial values. So if we wanted to have a hero whose name was Zach and had some stats already set up here, we kind of, if using this approach, we kind of have to distribute that hero across the different controls we've built here. As you can see, that this will work, but it would just be nicer to throw in a hero object itself, and see that work here. So we'll see that in future episodes, or future lessons, I suppose. All right, so let's move on to the next lesson, which is form arrays.